Where's the other one? What else are we doing with this? I'll check one of the first one.
Right.
We're going to campaign. Because you met him, he's on YouTube and all that stuff. This is Mark Bairco, he works for TV and stuff.
Oh, really?
I'm going to race over to the restroom here in a moment.
Okay.
So you guys know, I'm going to give you a 10 and a 5, and I kind of keep down low.
Shouldn't get that far, I don't think, but should be right around there.
I hear you. I just, they're really asking that I keep everything on the schedule. So
We'll definitely
don't mean to
keep
sound
an eye
like a
out.
jerk or anything. Do you guys need anything?
I got a water. Happy.
That works.
Are people just sitting down and presenting or standing up? What are people doing?
You're grabbing the mic and having it. It's wireless. You can walk around.
Okay.
I obviously don't have a clicker, so
Yeah.
We can take turns.
Okay, that's fine. Sure.
I'm going to race to the restroom, and then when we get really close, I'm going to shut the doors and give a quick little bit to talk, and then get to you guys. Is that you good with
Perfect.
that?
Yeah, we don't need very much at all.
Okay.
We're self-sufficient.
That's good. But if you do need anything, let me know.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's nice, right?
Oh yeah, you were. We did their class in Indianapolis, it was a lot more formal. They did their first one. Huge stuff. Like the guy kind of presents it first, right?
That's awesome.
So I like have to compare backup slides. So
That's cool.
yeah, we can just got it. Crowd. What time is it?
So many 2 hours in. Why would
That's why we can't.
Yeah, it's true.
Like I said, password.
Nope. Didn't do that. Don't do that though.
I figured we would.
Yeah, just pitching in myself. I'm all pitching in Creative Commons.
Yeah, I don't know if that's real, but I'm pretty sure that's real creative commons.
Creative Commons attribution.
Attribution.
You made
See,
That's when I go to Personally, we just say the latest budget thing. Something where you
This application is yeah,
I didn't even think about that, but you're right. It kind of happened, yeah. I mean, we're not going anywhere back there, so. Good job.
Just thought I'd tell you guys that there's a huge chunk of people in the food line.
Okay.
So if there's like a million people in your top
So
couple.
That's fine. It's okay. We understand.
I believe so.
If I just in iPhone applications and food, I take the food every time.
I'm going to be here. Everything's fine. No.
Really good.
Shutting down. I'm sure there's something on the drive somewhere. I'm just not 100%. So I just wanted to throw that out.
They're not being too bad. Recording on other habits.
It was actually when she pulled it out. It almost didn't register to my food. I mean, I hope it is, but I'm just throwing that out. That's one I'm unsure about. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. All right. You guys ready?
Yeah. We start a fresh recording from this. We get kind of.
Were you messing with it?
No, I wasn't messing with it. Come on. What do you think I am? Some sort of hacker?
Well, they're going to cut off the front end, anything on the front end.
Okay.
Before you start, so it's going to be. I was just doing it to basically make sure I did.
Yeah.
We didn't reveal any client secrets or anything.
I don't think so yet. So that's fine.
Anything before human erase. Okay, everybody, all ready to start our 12 o'clock talk? This is, again, the red team briefings is going to be hacking defending iPhone applications. And here you go.
Cool. Hi, how's it going? I'm Kevin Stadmeyer, and this is Garrett Held. Together we are messing up our slides.
Yeah.
Together we're managing consultants with TrustWave Spider Labs. We performed hundreds of application tests from mainframe to web to mobile. Obviously we'll be focusing primarily on the mobile talk today, and we're going to go over what we're going to cover. Secure coding and beyond, what to look for when assessing an iPhone application. So the primary target of this talk is going to be both pen testers and application developers. Hopefully, if you're into either one of those groups or both those groups, you can get a little bit of value from this talk. First things first, we're going to cover the basics, what exactly we're going to be talking about. We're going to do a setup for testing. We're going to figure out how to test this stuff. Then we're going to do secure storage of data and credentials. And then finally, inadvertent local storage and caching to kind of talk about places where the iPhone is saving information that you may not be expecting it to.
And then we're going to go into some more classic examples, things like client-side sanitization, things that we have to worry about in web development as well. Secure code guidelines, how those might differ from traditional applications. We'll talk a little bit about push notifications, and then a lot about some more on secure communications. And then we'll try to sum up in conclusion how you should be approaching these applications as a developer and as a tester.
So, the basics, just the facts. Why are people attacking mobile applications? Well, why does anybody attack anything? Well, there's really three main reasons we think. The first reason is stealing money, right? People don't do this for fun that often anymore. It's a big business. Stealing money, stealing credentials, credit card information, etc. Embarrassing people, hacktivists. So there's always a lot of news around Anonymous and LulzSec and the rest of it, and a million other groups out there that are trying to get their cause de celeb out there. The most recent one probably is going to be the Komodo hacker, the Iranian hacker who stole the SSL certificates. These are people who are not hacking necessarily for money, but either out of a sense of patriotic duty or because they think there's some injustice they want to right in the world. The last one is to get famous, right? Just put your name out there, like, I'm the guy who broke PayPal's application. I'm the guy who broke Bank X application. It's just a question of mobile applications are ultimately just an application and a smaller device. The reason we kind of got started with this is because we had a client who asked one of our sales guys if we knew anything about mobile apps and these newfangled iPhones. And of course, our sales guy, being a sales guy, said, of course, we have some guy who does nothing but mobile applications all day long. And then he said, Kevin, you're good at mobile apps, right? And I said, yeah, absolutely, sure. So I started doing a lot of research and kind of getting into it, and it was very interesting to me. And so I kind of did a lot of independent research along with Garrett, and we've taken what we found over the last couple of years, both for our clients as well as independent research, and kind of put together in a cohesive talk to hopefully spread the wealth.
And so, yeah, that's another big goal of this talk, is not securing the device itself or talking about the operating system. It's going to be making sure that you're not the weakest link in the chain. And so, the reason we don't want to talk about the device is there's been all sorts of things in the news, and there's plenty of research around that. Things like the ability to just plug in a stolen iPhone into a computer, jailbreak it, upload some scripts, and it downloads the keychain, and you can start cracking that then. And you can get access to all sorts of username and passwords. And so one of the things we're going to talk about is making sure that you're assuming that malware is on the device, and that it'll have access to some of this information.
Yeah, it's always good to assume a default insecure state when you're talking about applications put on a customer's device, because the majority of the time is going to be true. The device is going to be compromised in some way. So two other kind of high-risk issues that came about. One, and we'll kind of talk about the great implications of this, but essentially some guy put out an iPhone application in the App Store that purported to do one thing, and what it really did is it stole a user's iPhone's lock passwords. And so he was a security researcher, ostensibly, and he said that he did it in order to better understand what people use for their iPhone passwords. And we want to guess what the number one iPhone password is? 9999. Anybody else? 4 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4. Anybody else? That's right. So 2580 is the number one iPhone password, just right down the middle. 2580. Second is 0852, and then they also have 1, 2, 3, 4, 9999, and 0000. So what's the lesson from this, right? Is people pick bad passwords. That's something we've known in the security industry for a very long time. How many people here have an iPhone? How many people have a 4-digit numeric password for their iPhone? Right? Because it's kind of a pain in the butt when you're walking down the street, you're driving to log in and check your email if you have a multi-character 16-digit password, right? So it's a lot easier to just have, 1234 2580. And so even we who are in the security industry should probably know a little bit better, generally choose convenience over security. So it's something you have to be aware of when you work with sensitive data on the iPhone. Another prominent hack that's a little bit older now was the PayPal's iPhone app. We'll talk about what the root causes of that were also. But essentially what happened there is that PayPal created their application so that it was easier to use in the development environment. And they did this by getting rid of the SSL certificate check. And then they rushed to production, and guess what they forgot to remove? The code that disables that SSL certificate check. So that means anybody can man in the middle of this application. Obviously, it's a bad time if you're a PayPal developer. So we're going to talk about a lot of kind of the common causes and effects of all these iPhone applications, and we'll go from there. So just the facts, man. how are people attacking mobile apps? New and unsafe operating systems. You have these new OSs coming out. iOS is a new OS. Android is a new OS. They're constantly being developed. People make mistakes when they build new OSs, new software. It's just the way it goes. It's one of those things. There's kind of an apocryphal story about how when they built Windows Vista, they wanted to rewrite a lot of the networking code from scratch to clear out a lot of the rubble, I guess, that was in the Windows networking code. But the problem is people who wrote the networking code for Windows Vista weren't the same people who wrote the fixes for Windows 3.11 back in the day. And so you had, in the first beta versions of Windows 7 or Vista, a lot of things like teardrop attacks and Smurf attacks, and just kind of really, really old attacks that people fixed a long time ago, and then people forgot they had to fix them. So we're kind of seeing a little bit of that with operating systems. Terrible developers who don't care, maybe, right? I think that if you were a developer who doesn't care about security, that may or may not make you terrible. It really depends. Clueless users who don't know they should care. I think this is probably most users. Most users don't have an idea of security in their mind. Or they may, watch something on Good Morning America or whatever morning show there is, The View, about, iPhone security and are hackers stealing your children's secrets online, more at 11. And that's really the extent of the security knowledge. But I think that, unfortunately, most users don't really understand it. So you can't rely on users to protect their information. You have to protect it for them. What security models are we not talking about? We're not talking about the first layer, which is the Apple Store. We'll kind of touch on that briefly, but we're not going to be really discussing that in depth. And we're not going to talk about sandboxing via the seatbelt. Seatbelt is just kind of the Apple term for a sandbox environment in the iPhone. And basically what it does is it prevents the iPhone applications from ostensibly viewing or modifying other applications' data on the iPhone.
However, if the device is jailbroken, then the seatbelt doesn't work anymore. So we're going to assume, again, that it's been jailbroken.
Yeah, talking about iPhone apps. We're not talking about Safari. We're not talking about OS vulnerabilities. Just straight up iPhone apps, day in, day out. Okay, so setting up the testing environment.
Oh, so do we mean setting up the decompiler? No, we're not going to be reversing any binaries in this presentation. There are lots of good research to cover that. However, we just don't have time, and we don't think it's going to be the most common vector of attack. However, we will talk about in the best practices section, making sure we're minimizing what information we're storing on the device, both in databases and in the application code itself.
Yeah, I mean, reverse engineering and decompiling applications is fun and all, but the reality is that there's enough low-hanging fruit out there that attackers can fully compromise your users and your servers without having to even bother doing that stuff. Okay, so how are we going to test an iPhone application? Let's say you have an iPhone application, either one that your company has written or one you've downloaded from the iPhone store. If you downloaded an application for the iPhone store, it's important to note that the IPA file is compiled for the ARM architecture of the A5 chip on the iPhone, so it will not run verbatim in your desktop computer. So that's why the simulator is called a simulator and not an emulator. For the Android, it actually is an emulator because the APKs will run. They're compiled for an Intel processor, and they'll run on both environments. With iPhone, it's not true. So if you have an application from the store, you have to test it on the phone. If you have your own application, it becomes a lot easier to test, and it's a little more worthwhile. So first things first, we have to get a proxy set up. So this is Burp. You can use anything you want. You can use WebScarab. You can use Peros, any proxy you want, doesn't matter. What is important is that you set it up, if you're testing on the phone, to A, support invisible, and B, disable loopback only. And the reason you want to do loopback only is because we're going to be running the iPhone on the local Wi-Fi network, the same network as the computer running the proxy, and we're going to proxy all the requests from the iPhone through that proxy. The next one, we have to get the certs. This one is fairly straightforward. You set up your proxy, you set up your web browser to point through the proxy. You go to some SSL-enabled site. It pops up the little window saying it's insecure. You view the certificate, and then you have to make sure you click on the root level certificate. So if it's Burp, it'll be the Portswigger CA. You export that certificate as a PEM file. It has to be a PEM file. You can't use another format like DER. The iPhone just doesn't recognize it. So you export it as a PEM file. You save it somewhere. The easiest way to get the cert on the phone is just to email it to yourself. Super easy way. You click on the cert and it'll install automatically. This does sort of open up some questions about how you are going to handle social engineering attempts. Is it possible, can somebody send a certificate to somebody and will they click on it and install it? Well, if there's one thing I've learned in computer security is that the answer is yes. Somebody will always use something no matter how stupid it seems to you. There's always that 1% who's going to click on the spam for whatever, and that same 1% is going to click on the cert and say, oh, it's free money, I'll definitely install it. Apple does do a decent job trying to prevent that. You can see here when you first click on it, you get this not trusted, and it says install profile, contains a certificate. What does that mean to the average user? Exactly nothing. What does it mean to security? You should maybe recognize this and you can figure out what it means. You also have a second follow-up that says the authenticity of Portsmouth CA cannot be verified. Installing this profile will change settings on your iPhone. Installing the certificate Portsmouth CA will add it to your list of trusted certificates on your iPhone. Again, what does that mean to the average end user? A whole lot of nothing. I think that Apple should probably change this warning sign so that it's more direct, so that they're saying, warning, installing this will allow people to view your network traffic. Something a little bit more kind of, I guess, recognizable to the average user than just saying it's another cert you're installing. Okay, so then on the phone, you go to settings, general, Wi-Fi network, and then you click on the Wi-Fi network you connect to. There's my network, ABC Superfun. And you connect to the manual proxy. Put in your server. You can see it's just a local computer on the local network. Set up the proxy. Turn off authentication, and then make a request to your website from the phone. If everything is set up correctly, the server is installed correctly, you should be able to view an SSL website with no warnings, and you'll see it in burp. At this point, it almost becomes like a standard web application or web services test. If you've done a web application test using a proxy before, it'd be very familiar for you. If the application is using HTTP for the communications to the server, it's a very straightforward process. Okay, so on the computer machine, let's say you want to use the simulator instead of the emulator. There's a lot of advantages to using the simulator. You can have a lot more access to fun tools, and we'll talk about that in a second. As well, it's just easier to test things on the simulator versus having to fiddle around on your phone and make it work that way. So the first thing you have to do is you have to modify the iPhone simulator T-Security or Trust Store SQLite database. SQLite database, very simple. You can use any SQLite management software you want. Firefox actually has a plugin called SQLite Manager, and it's sort of odd that you have to install a plugin to a web browser to control a SQLite database, but it works well, so who am I to complain?
The Apple Store will also sell you one for $20 or something, I think.
Yeah, so if you want to pay $20 to Apple, go for that. Or you can get it free for Firefox, hey. So the first thing you have to do is you open the Trust Store SQLite 3 database, you go to the T settings table, and then you can see there in my very small screenshot that you have to take the SHA-1 fingerprint of the root CA certificate. So when you export that certificate, you open it up in the keychain tool if you're on a Mac, you look at the SHA-1 fingerprint, copy and paste, and you put it right into the table. The format is not just the SHA-1 fingerprint, it's going to be X single quote SHA-1 fingerprint without any spaces, single quote. Who knows why they have that format, they just decided that's what they wanted to do. At this point, you have the certificate installed in the simulator. If you tried to proxy an SSL website through the proxy, you won't get that pop-up saying untrusted certificate. It'll automatically trust any certificate your proxy serves up. So you have all that. Well, then what do you do next? Anybody recognize this icon? What is it? What did you say? Yeah, some Xcode. It's actually the Instruments tool that is shipped with Xcode. And Instruments, has anybody heard of sysinternals from Windows? Some people. Instruments is basically sysinternals for Mac. Super, super, super handy if you're doing a pen test either against a thick client or in this case a mobile application. All you have to do is you point out the PID of the running iPhone application, attach it to that PID, and then you can view everything it does. So you can attach it to the PID, and you can see things like file activity, I/O inputs, directory I/O, file attributes, core data, which is a method that the iPhone uses to store data securely. And then you can attach it to that PID, you run the application, run through it, you can see all the places it's writing to disk, all the places it's reading from disk, all the network operations it does. It's a very low-level look at how the application works. This is the example of sort of information you can see. So you can see here this highlighted line. This happened when I went to a website and then I pressed the home button. When you press the home button on an iPhone, it takes a screenshot of the screen and it saves it to the directory. So you can then go on the file system and find that screenshot. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the insecure storage and local caching of data.
So, typically how you store credentials on the device is going to be with the keychain. However, the keychain is going to provide some form of indefinite storage. So if the application is installed, you install some credentials with it, and you remove the application. The keychain has no way of knowing that the application was removed, so they're going to stay on the device. Can you store credentials securely without the keychain? You can. Don't let that feature make you lazy. However, don't store credentials in the keychain unless you don't care about certain things. Like we'll mention in a little bit, an attacker will have access to that once they jailbreak the phone, if they have physical access to the phone as well. And so here we have a keychain compromised through jailbreaking. So through a series of steps, they retrieve the password stored in the keychain. They jailbreak a stolen iPhone, something they picked up at a bar, probably left by an Apple employee there. Plug it in, gain secure cell access, copy the scripts over to the iPhone. It compromises the keychain, and the scripts output the victim's password then. Where should you store them? Not on the device, at least not in plain text. This is from the SQL Manager, or SQLite Manager again, the Firefox plugin. We opened up one of the databases and found things like usernames in there from a bank application. So you want to be very careful what you're storing in that database, because an attacker, who jailbreaks the iPhone will have access to that information.
Yeah, I mean, we're very cognizant as consultants that a lot of the times we'll go in there and we'll see an application, we'll say, you're doing it wrong, fix it. And then it's easy for us to say, fix it. It's harder for you as a developer to actually fix it. And so I think that's a big problem with consultants, is that they'll suggest a course of action, but they won't give you the tools you need to continue on the course of action. So being cognizant of that fact, we kind of thought about a little bit how you want to securely store data at rest. Things you might want to look for.
And so when you're reviewing an application, or you're reviewing your own application, you want to look for database calls. Make sure injection's not possible. So even if they don't jailbreak the device, you want to make sure that they can't get to the information some other way. If you're using core data, or any database really, you want to make sure that that's another trust boundary, that you're authenticating that information again. You don't want to trust things implicitly that come from the device. As I'll say probably a couple more times, you want to imagine that it's jailbroken, malware's installed, and it's running off the DEF CON network. And then design an application from there. So recommendations for our non-credentialed data. Don't store it on the phone if at all possible. So never has it been so easy to lose so much so fast. These hold an enormous amount of information, and if you lose your device, that information should all be considered compromised at that point. It's just a matter of time. Require a user to enter a passcode. This can still be brute forced once the encrypted text is found, and it usually provides a poor user experience on mobile devices. Especially, the more steps they have to go through to access your application, the less likely they are to use it and go to a competitor. So let's say we have a large amount of information on the phone, and we want to store it on the phone, not in the cloud, but we want to make it secure in case the device is lost. We could reverse the process. Maybe we want to store the key out in the cloud. So somebody has to enter a passcode. It goes out to the cloud, gets a much larger key, so they use a PIN code or something like that. And that way, if the device is lost and reported stolen, you can remove that key from the cloud, and they won't be able to access it even with the PIN code. However, that will require some sort of always-on connection, so they won't be able to use it in airplane mode or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously one of the big benefits of having a mobile phone is that it's a mobile phone, and that you can use it anywhere you want. The problem is that if you start making requirements on users, like you have to connect to the network, you maybe get some pushback from the business unit. It may not be in line with their user experience expectations. It is a very secure way to do it, though. So it kind of comes down to, do you want to have a usable application, or do you want to have a secure application? And there's certainly ways to kind of do it in the middle, but the secure storage of credentials isn't one of the ways you can really have too much give on between usable and secure. So then I say don't store credentials in the keychain, because you can access it when somebody steals a phone. And people always say, but key sec attribute accessible when unlocked, right? And this is an attribute that is on by every piece of data you store in the keychain. It automatically has this attribute, and what it means is exactly what it says. It says the attribute is accessible when unlocked. So when the phone is unlocked, then this information is also unlocked in the keychain. If the keychain is locked, the user, if somebody steals your phone, they are going to have to know the PIN in order to get into that keychain information. But then we think back to that the list of iPhone passwords we talked about before, and by default, most users' passwords suck. Right? I mean, I'll admit it, my password sucks. It's 4-digit numeric. There is not that many. Look familiar. This is the number one, lock screen. Most people are not picking complex 20-character passwords with upper and lowercase special characters. Most people are picking 4 numeric digits. Most users, news of the world, they stole a lot of voicemail just by guessing pins, essentially. If you have a simple pin, there's only 10,000 possibilities. If you can crack 100,000 keys in a second, which is about right for a dedicated cracking machine, that means you can crack an iPhone PIN just by brute forcing against the offline database in about 1/10 of a second. So that's not exactly what I would call secure. If a journalist can hack your PIN, then it's probably not secure. Hope there's no journalist here. I said that last time there was a journalist and gave me a dirty look. What? Yes, that's true. That's if somebody has the phone and they're just trying to plug it in. But if they actually steal your phone, they jailbreak it, and they pull the keychain off, and they're brute forcing it offline, you don't have that same protection. So that protection, and what he said was that the phone will allow you to have a setting where if you put in the wrong PIN too many times, it erases all the data. And that's fine against a casual attacker. Somebody picks up your phone in a bar, and they just want to steal your phone because, hey, it's a free iPhone. But somebody who's going after it because they say, you are the CISO for a bank and I want to know all your email, and I'm going to steal your credentials through your keychain, they're not going to be just trying to guess it randomly. They're going to download the keychain and try to brute force it offline. That is a good point. So storing credentials, protecting stupid users.
And, stupid users need the most protection. So, your application should require some sort of strong password. So 8+ characters, alphanumeric. And that's going to have to be a business decision, of course. And it's going to, may harm the user experience, but if the data is sensitive enough, you may want to take that precaution. Use real and good encryption, not stuff your nephew wrote, not Rot 13. Don't rely on inherently insecure PIN to protect users. I think we've covered that a couple of times as the weaknesses to that. And if the users knew what they were doing, we wouldn't be here today. Like you saw earlier in the Apple example, when you install the certificate, it makes them go through a few steps to at least slow them down a little bit to make them think about what they're doing before they install a bad certificate.
I mean, I always think of a typical user like my mother, and God bless her, I love my mother, of course. But the other day she calls me up, she's on her iPad. She goes, Kevin, it says I have Windows Security Scanner found 17,000 viruses, and I tried to click the button to take it off, and it didn't go anywhere. It didn't work. I think I have all these viruses on my iPad. I said, okay, Mom, I think it's okay. Just be careful in the future when you do that. So, even when it's obvious to anybody who knows anything about security that a Windows Security Scanner on an iPad is probably not a legitimate pop-up, that just doesn't really click with most users. They don't make those connections that somebody who's a little more tech savvy may make. Inadvertent local storage and caching. So we talked before about I ran an iPhone application, I attached the PID, in this case it was just Safari, and then I pressed the home button and we saw that PNG file being written to the disk. So what exactly is that PNG file? Well, that's a screenshot. Where are they stored? When are they taken? Who can access them? So I accidentally your data, right? So they're being stored on the local file system for an indefinite amount of time, basically until iOS decides there are too many screenshots and they need to clear some out. And what that does is that when you close an application on the iPhone, you press the home button, it shrinks down. When you open it back up again, it pulls up that screenshot. And what that does is it provides a very nice user experience for the user. They think, okay, this iPhone is very snappy. I can close down an application, open up right away. They don't realize they're just seeing a picture of the application until the application actually loads in the background and then it replaces the picture. So it's primarily just to make the application easier to use, to make people think the iPhone is maybe faster than it actually is. So how do you protect against that? And again, a very obviously named attribute. In the info.plist that's included with every application, there is a setting you can add, and it's called UI application exits on suspend. Anyone want to take a guess at what that means? I know it's pretty tricky. You guys aren't very fun. Come on, what does it mean? It means it exits on suspend, right? So if it exits on suspend, then it knows it's not going to come back, and so it doesn't take the screenshot because it knows it doesn't have a snappy experience coming back because the application is closed down. So that means that if you have things like plain text, credit card numbers or credentials or whatever else, they're not going to be inadvertently stored in a screenshot. Other storage of information.
And so, I don't know if anybody in here is like me and has turned off autocomplete globally, but a lot of people don't. I think a few mingled words is a small price to pay for this not happening to you. However, it tries to correct itself and learn. So if you keep using the same word over and over again, it's going to remember that word. Does anyone know where that word's stored? Or where those words are stored? On the device? So it's got to be somewhere, right? So it's just a file in there that keeps a list of these words that you use. And so an attacker is going to be able to get that list. So we have to assume that autocomplete may be storing data that your users type in incorrectly.
Yeah, I mean, and for autocomplete to work, obviously all the applications have to have access to it. And so if you don't turn off autocomplete on things like credit card fields, it's possible that you could have things like credit card numbers stored in autocomplete.
And so this is just a property of the text field where you can set the auto-correction to none. So you can make sure that sensitive fields don't do that auto-correct, even if other fields in your application might. And so now we're going to talk about client-side sanitization. So this is especially popular. We've seen a ton of this in web applications where JavaScript's checking it and then just sending it off to the server. But it's very popular in Flash applications and mobile applications too.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like developers kind of eventually learn their lesson that you can't have client-side sanitization in whatever technology they're working on, but then they get a new technology, and all of a sudden it's back to magic. And that, I'll do client-side sanitization because it's an iPhone application. Who's going to be able to intercept that? You can't put a proxy on an iPhone application. Just kind of common misconceptions that just aren't true. So it's bad. There's less burden on the server. That's good for you, but it also means that there's less security controls in the server, and that's bad for you. Critical bypasses are very common with client-side controls. So like I said, some classic web application faults are going to translate really well into some of our iPhone applications. We've tested applications over and over, and we still find this today, where they rely on JavaScript controls, hidden fields for authorization and authentication controls, JSON responses we can manipulate, and information stored in Flash objects. Same type of thing is going to be stored in a mobile application that we can decompile, or is going to be even stored on the device itself that we can directly gain access to without even decompiling it. And so we also have to assume rogue clients. So attackers can write apps. Some of those testers can too. And so client-side secrets can be decompiled, or we could write our own application that doesn't do any filtering, or we can decompile secrets out of the application. We don't care if it's obfuscated right now. So someone from Apple could stand up and you can't decompile this application. We put all sorts of protections against it. That may be true right now, but in 6 months that may all change. And you don't want that information on the device, and somebody in 6 months just has to click a script and he has all that information then. We also can't rely on it being the Apple Store preventing everything. So with Android, they have multiple stores, and they've already had malware being sent through there. With Apple Store, we have to assume that real malware is going to make it through there. We already know rogue applications have. I believe there's a flashlight application that also had a secret tethering feature on it as well, which will allow your phone to tether before that was an option of the operating system. Yeah, and that was pulled by Apple. Again, we talked before about that application that stole users' passwords. Who here has actually submitted an application to the App Store, the Apple App Store? Has anybody? What did they require from you?
They said they required one.
What did they actually require? Ultimately, they really, in the end, they just require a copy of the application. They don't ask for source code. They don't do I walk through the source code. The people testing these applications are not security testers. They're more like QA testers, right? They're checking for naughty pictures and naughty words to make sure that the rating is appropriate, and also to make sure that it's not duplicating functionality in the iPhone, which is one thing they disallow. So just because it's going through the Apple Store, if you are a competent developer, you will be able to write an application that can both pass the iPhone Store checks and still do a lot of really nasty things to the iPhone. And again, a popular way for Android to do it is take the top 20 apps, decompile them, add in Trojans, and put them back on the iPhone, on the App Store for free. And so everyone says, oh, Angry Birds are free, awesome. So they download it, and instead it's a Trojan. I mean, it's not a great situation.
So, how do we do this right? Same as any client-server application or web application. Let the server side enforce this. Assume everything coming from, the device was from a rogue client. And enforce secure communication. So make sure SSL is being enforced or whatever you're using to protect the information being sent across. And so, what exactly applies in this world? And we're still using this slide. We've modified it a little bit. So we're going to be worried in iOS applications about SQL injection, other injections, privilege escalation, session hijacking, overflows, format string problems, insecure use of SSL, and all those apply to the application and the server it's communicating with as well. Cross-site request forgery and cross-site scripting, not as big a deal unless you're using the browser. However, we have some asterisks there. If you're making a direct call to the browser, so this was a recent Android issue, and you send loads JavaScript alert, then you have a cross-site scripting problem in your application. So embedded browsers in the application may also share web app issues. There's also the problem of rendering HTML in your app using some sort of engine to render HTML in your iOS application. And this is what happened to Skype recently. Did anybody hear about this one? There's a cross-site scripting where if you put in some sort of HTML into your first name and somebody loaded up this information on their iPhone or iOS device, it would execute the JavaScript. So the seatbelt was still there to protect the rest of the iPhone. However, what do you think Skype has access to that might be somewhat sensitive? Contacts. So I downloaded sent back the entire contact address book as a proof of concept. And so if we're an attacker and we're looking at an iPhone application, say you write one for a bank and it's on the device, we could be looking at overflows or format string problems to access the device itself, but typically the greater variety we have, if we're targeting the communications in the server, we're going to do the injections, the privilege escalation, session hijacking, and secure use of SSL. And those are all things that you control as developers. And so, it's time to throw out any assumption that the device will protect you. It won't. Not only will it be compromised, it can help, an attacker write a malicious client that'll provide some sort of, bypass of your assumptions. And a new set of security practices need to be developed when creating these apps. So, we're shifting paradigms, and we're going to talk about these. We hate ourselves for saying that. Talk about each of these areas in a little bit more detail. So local storage, what is stored and why, educating our QA teams, especially on the proxy testing, but other things as well, reviewing local and remote inputs, making sure that those trust boundaries from the device itself and from the communications of the server are properly sanitized, and information leakage that may be happening.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's not rocket science, right? It's just an iPhone is just a small computer, and an iPhone application is just an application that runs on a small computer. It's just a question of understanding all the different areas of the application that may lead to data leakage or vulnerabilities that may be present in the application, and have your QA team and security testers know about those and look for it. It's certainly something that we can get ahead of, and there's really no difference between an application on an iPhone and an application on a desktop when you get right down to it. Local storage review. So you want to review what's stored on the device by the application. The easiest way to do this is to load it up in the simulator, attach instruments to the process ID, and then start watching where it writes to the disk. Very, very easy. It shows you everywhere the data is being written, everywhere it's being read from. It's a very easy way to get a comprehensive view of all the information. Another way to do it is to do a source code review. That's also, again, very easy if you can read Objective-C. It's just a question of what you have access to and what sort of level you have access to for the application. I should point out that for the simulator, when you want to do a simulator test, let's say you are working with a vendor who's created an iPhone application for you, and you want to do a test of it. They're unwilling to give you the source code for a variety of reasons, but you can get the compiled simulator build. So when they build in Xcode to test it on a simulator, it creates a little folder in the iPhone simulator. They can zip that up and send it to you. You drop it into your simulator folder, and the app is automatically installed. There's not a very complex process to it. And at that point, you just have a compiled binary. It's essentially the same as the binary that will go on the phone, but compiled for an Intel architecture versus an ARM architecture. So a vendor really shouldn't have any complaints about providing that compiled binary. You want to review what's stored on the device by iOS, so not only what the application is storing, but also the screenshots, the autocomplete, etc. You want to make sure the autocomplete is being turned off with appropriate text fields. That's a lot easier to do in a code review. When you have access to the binary, you can just go ahead and start typing things into all the text fields and see what autocompletes. It's a very easy way to see it. Keep it simple. Review to remove, right? So this is kind of, I think, the overarching idea of security is that we want to keep it as simple as possible. I think complexity adds security problems. If you can keep it simple, if you can review to remove, it makes everyone's jobs a lot easier.
And so we also need to educate QA departments if you have one, or whoever's going to be testing the application. You don't want them just picking up the iPhone, typing in single tick drop table. Oh, no, it's not vulnerable to SQL injection. I'll try a cross-site scripting payload. Okay, no, this iPhone application looks okay. So we have to tell them about setting up that proxy environment, the different inputs that will go into it, and how to test those.
So local and remote inputs. User input from apps is always a concern, right? That's kind of security 101, especially for web applications. You don't want to trust anything coming from a user. Anything coming from the user into your server can be manipulated. No matter how amazing you think your special scheme is, ultimately it's going to be broken. It's the same reason why DRM really doesn't work, because at the end of the day, you have to give them the keys to decrypt the content and the encrypted content. So eventually they're going to find a way to crack it. We talked before, you can write your own applications. The people who are writing viruses to steal this information are not doing it from their mom's basement. They are organized criminals. They go into work every day. They have go to production, push meetings. They have go, no-go decisions. They have great tech support. Little side note, there's a Trojan called Zeus, which is used for botnet. And it's famous in the underground for having great tech support. So if you buy Zeus for $10,000 and you can't just infect that millionth machine for some reason, you can call them up and they'll walk you through it. So these are organized businesses. They have serious resources. Don't forget about responses that could be intercepted or hijacked, right? So somebody could hijack it. If you're not checking the SSL certificate, you're going to have a bad time. And then finally, maintain the integrity of the device. This is difficult to do, to say the least. There are a variety of ways you can do it. There's things like MDM, which is Mobile Device Policy Manager. You can try to check for jailbroken iPhone before your application starts up. There's lots of ways to do it. There's just as many ways to defeat those checks. So the end result is that you should be assuming that everyone talking to your server, every app talking to your server, is a rogue application. Information leakage. You want to examine all traffic to and from the application like should be done with web applications. A common thing I see is that people will say, okay, great, we have this mobile banking site, let's go ahead and make a mobile banking application. And say, okay, well, we have this whole site already set up, the service is already set up, let's just send all the information to the iPhone and we'll take what we need out of those responses. If that's the case, it may be the possibility that your server is sending too much information to the iPhone. If somebody is able to intercept that traffic, maybe they could use that extra information you're sending that you're assuming nobody has access to as sort of an information gathering to help them attack your servers later on. Additional examination of what sensitive data may be in the binary. Is it necessary? Keep it simple, review to remove. A good example of this is that I tested a financial transfer application on the iPhone, and they had decided that they wanted to be super secure. So the way they're going to be super secure is that they only allow the official iPhone application to get a session ID from the server. And the way they enforced that is that they would do they had a simple symmetric key on the device, and the symmetric key also on the server. They would encrypt the timestamp with the symmetric key. If the server got a response or request for a session ID that didn't include the encrypted timestamp, then they would deny it. Well, couple problems there, right? A, the application was free to download in the App Store, so anybody in the entire world can download it and get a valid session. The other problem is that the secret key is being stored in the binary. We talked before about how DRM doesn't work because you have to have the key and you have to have the encrypted content. Well, similarly, you have to have the binary. We ran the binary through IDA, and we saw a secret key function that just had the secret key in plain text. So it's very, very obvious. We ultimately recommended the client take it out because it didn't add any security. And we worried that if somebody had downloaded this application and ran it through IDA, and they saw such an obvious blunder, that they would then take extra effort to kind of find any extra holes that are in there. So, you want to make sure that you only have what you absolutely need in there. Secure coding.
And so now we're going to talk at a high level about some of the things that we found that lead to these vulnerabilities. However, secure coding, especially for the iOS, could be an entire day or more of instruction. But who thought buffer overflows were gone? I was kind of hoping they were, but they're back in style now. Apple's bringing them back. So we can arbitrarily execute code loaded onto the device, and this could bypass the seatbelt if we do. So how do we do it right? Same concerns as in C. We'll be checking boundaries, things like that. And we want to use appropriate functions. Has anyone here heard of strl copy? As opposed to strn copy, one person? All right. So you have to check the Apple instructions, and there's a link down there to the developer site where you can see some of the recommended functions as far as how to do these string operations securely. But these improve upon already what's considered secure functions. You want to use properly calculated buffer sizes, so using constants. And this includes integer bounds checking as well, so we don't want any integer overflows. And format string problems, again, anything that we had in C, we're probably going to have on the iOS device as well. So, application displays user input, as they're known to do. It uses some NS string with format option. You can use the printf function, and attacker sends %s, 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 %s instead of hello. What do you think is going to happen?
It might crash, or it might just, 10s basically says take data from the stack and read it off. So you can start reading data from the stack, you can use other tokens, %n, %x, start writing data to the stack. Printf vulnerabilities are very dangerous. They're kind of deceptively dangerous, but you can easily allow for arbitrary coding.
So how do we do it right? Just like web applications, we're going to enforce the secure coding standard. No vulnerable function should accept untrusted user input. So when we have a string format vulnerability, it's usually we have printf, paren, and then the variable, and then a paren, like printf, argument 1. And that's where we get into trouble. However, if we properly format it and reference the variables, then it's fine.
Okay, so here's an example of something that did go wrong. This was an application we tested, and a couple things it was doing that wasn't immediately obvious from the perspective of our application pen test. So this were things that are happening on the server, and it kind of explained the issues that we had. So one thing it did is that it manages the state using the device ID, not the session ID. So the session ID was being passed back and forth, but on the server, it would accept the device ID as a session. The other issue is that the session was not terminated properly on the server side. So when you click log out, the server continued to exist. The session continued to exist in the server side. So this led to a very interesting vulnerability. The following conditions were met. We can go back actually. Sorry. The following conditions were met. The user logged into the application. Once they logged into the application, at some point in the last day, subsequently logged out. The attacker then tries to log in again. The attacker supplies the wrong credentials through the mobile application, and then the application then requests a session state update or a refresh while waiting for the incorrect login to be sent. So, for instance, Garrett logs into the application. He leaves his phone in a bar somewhere. I pick it up. I then try to log in with the incorrect credentials, and the server says, okay, let me check these credentials against the authentication database. While the server is waiting to make that check to get the response back from the database, the iPhone application then said, go ahead and refresh my session for me. The application server would then say, okay, refresh the session. Okay, I don't have anything for this JSession ID, wherever the session ID was, but I do have something for your device ID. And so this must be your active session. So I'm going to go ahead and log you in as this active session. Later on, the authentication server would say, no, it's not actually them, but by then it's too late, and the application has logged you into the server. So it was a very interesting bug to find, because one of the first things we do when we test an iPhone application is try to bypass the authentication. So we did this, got the application, brand new install, tried to bypass authentication, no luck, okay, we'll leave that alone. And then sometime later on, we went back and tested it again, and now we were able to bypass authentication. And so that was difficult to find out. What we ended up doing is we had to get a whole bunch of people together, and they looked at all the different logs on the servers to see what was being done with each request, and it ended up being that the server was using the device ID, which the application developers claim not to be aware of, but that's a little bit suspect, and were able to compromise the session that way. So how do you do it right? You have to have strong server-side controls over access. Policy enforcement on concurrent logins. So if somebody logs in again with the same session ID, the other one should be logged out. Do not maintain the session ID via the device ID. In iOS 5, actually the UDID, Universal Device ID, is gone away. But the problem with the device ID is that everyone says, okay, here's a device ID that is unique to each phone. I will use this to track my users, right? And it should be secret, and it ends up being sent over the network in plain text to a variety of applications and games. It's bad. It's obvious.
So what can go wrong with servers? Just about everything. Just like a client-server application, make sure it's protected. So harden the server. Same guidelines as OWASP for that.
Push notifications. This is my research. My friend Natesh Johnny, smart guy, that's his website, check it out, found that in order to do push notifications on iOS, Apple issues you a public and private certificate. You sign the push update with the private certificate, push it to Apple, and they verify it and then send it out to all your devices. A lot of developers don't understand what a private and public certificate is, and so as a result, they publish it on their website. So anybody can go look for this, you find the website, and you can push notifications to any application you want. Just kind of a basic security fail. NSURL, iOS is secure by default for SSL connections. The problem is that if you then circumvent that method in order to better test or more easily test your device in the simulator, that can cause some problems. We saw that in PayPal, where people they took out that SSL check and it kind of came back and bit them in the butt. So you have to make sure that when you go from a simulator environment to actual production environment, that you're actually checking SSL certificates. So review.
And so we went over the basics, motivations of attackers, what they're going to go after on the device, how to set up for testing and look for these things, talking about secure storage of data and the credentials, the inadvertent local storage that the operating system is going to do on its own, talking about client-side sanitization. If you didn't catch that earlier, it's bad. Secure coding practices, just the beginning that we can start to build on that. Push notifications, and things that you might not think about. So you make sure that operations is deploying it securely as well.
The end result is that testing is easy, both for you and for them being attackers. Security is hard, really just for you, because you have to secure every possible entry point. Attackers just have to find one bug and they can get all the access they want. So test everything and be thorough and make sure you're aware of what the problems are. Okay. And we'll be around for questions afterwards. Yeah. Yeah, and I think actually, yeah, and this one, people just don't test. They don't think about it. They assume, oh, it's on an iPhone. What's the worst that could happen? But yeah, I mean, that's a big problem. Is you want to install, you have to, on iOS 4, the application is gone, and all the data that's in its directory sticks around, but it's stored in the keychain, say that information still sticks around. The application, there's no way to remove it. So it is a big problem. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. If you have more questions, they'll be out.